Hello everyone, welcome to Literature and Narratives. Today we are going to discuss an important essay by F.R. Lewis. It's called Hard Times An Analytic Note. We are going to look at this work in terms of an essay question which could possibly come in examinations. Why does F.R. Lewis accommodate Hard Times as the only significant novel of Charles Dickens? Before we look into it, we should first know who F.R. Lewis was or is. F.R. Lewis was a critic. He was born in 1895 in Cambridge. He was an important figure in the development of modern literary criticism. He was also important in the elevation of English as a serious academic discipline. He insisted that valuation was the principal concern of criticism. Hard Times An Analytic Note, the essay, was published in 1948 in the book The Great Tradition by F.R. Lewis. Lewis perceives Hard Times as Dickens's greatest novel. He, in The Great Tradition, described the book as a moral fable. This view was revised in later work called Dickens the Novelist. Hard Times for These Times. This is the full title of Charles Dickens's famous novel, and it was dedicated to Thomas Carlyle and was published in 1854. Dickens's first work of overt criticism, that was Hard Times. This work reflects his contempt for utilitarian ideals. Coketown, the fictional city created by Dickens, represents the worst aspects of industrial revolution in the 19th century. Dickens blames utilitarianism for England's moral, legal, spiritual, and intellectual decay. Utilitarianism is a theory of morality which advocates actions that foster happiness and opposes actions that cause unhappiness. Utilitarianism promotes the greatest amount of good for the greatest number of people. When used in a socio political construct, utilitarian ethics aims for the betterment of society as a whole. Utilitarianism is a reason based approach to determining right and wrong, but it has limitations. Now let's look at the premise of Hard Times, the novel. Before we venture forth into the essay, we should have at least read the novel or have at least read the detailed summary of the novel. Now let's look at the premise, and it concerns mainly with a utilitarian father called Thomas Gradgrind, who brings up his children on those ideals of facts and reason, only to find towards the end how futile all of it were when his children's lives fall apart. Now, why is Hard Times the best of Dickens? The novel had a complete seriousness that could excite the adult world, according to F.R. Lewis. Lewis praised the novel's tight story, clear symbolism, moral values, sharp dialogues, natural style, and convincing denouement. It captured the writer's moral vision. It has not got the recognition it should have got because of the traditional approach to the novel. So, F.R. Lewis, in this famous essay, which appears in his The Great Tradition, talks about why he considers Hard Times as the best work of Charles Dickens. Right in the beginning, he calls this brilliant work, which is set in the fictional industrial Coketown, a masterpiece. He asserts that Hard Times has, of all Dickens's work, all strength of his genius, and it is a completely serious work of art. The representative significance of character, episode, and so on becomes apparent as we read the novel. The Dickensian vitality is very evident here. It is represented through the characters of the circus people who represent the Dickensian vitality or energy. They are so full of life. The title of the novel confirms Dickens's inspiration. Usually, Dickens's criticism of the world around him is casual, but in Hard Times, he has a comprehensive vision of the inhumanities of Victorian England, which is represented by Thomas Gradgrind and his philosophy of utilitarianism. He is the Member of Parliament for Coketown and has brought up his children on the lines of the ideals of John Stuart Mill, which was previously carried out on himself, and he became successful because of the application of this principle of utilitarianism. So he tries to apply this principle on his own children. He marries his eldest daughter Louisa off to a much older Josiah Bounderby, who is Victorian rugged individualism, a belief that an individual can succeed on his own without any help whatsoever from the government. So Bounderby claims to have come from humble background and to have made it on his own. Lewis considers again Hard Times to be a well-formed novel as he says that it combines flexibility with consistency. He gives the example of the opening scene in schoolroom to prove his point. Girl number 20, said Mr. Gradgrind, squarely pointing with his square forefinger. I don't know that girl. Who is that girl? Sissy Job, sir, explained number 20, blushing, standing up and curtsying. Sissy is not a name, said Mr. Gradgrind. Don't call yourself Sissy. Call yourself Cecilia. It's father as calls me Sissy, sir, returned the young girl in a trembling voice and with another curtsy. Then he has no business to do it, said Mr. Gradgrind. Tell him he mustn't. Cecilia Jupe, let me see, what is your father? He belongs to the horse riding, if you please, sir. Mr. Gradgrind frowned and waved off the objectionable calling with his hand. We don't want to know anything about that here. You mustn't tell us about that here. Your father breaks horses, don't he? If you please, sir. When they can get any to break, they do break horses in the ring, sir. You mustn't tell us about the ring here. Very well, then. Describe your father as a horse breaker. He doctors sick horses, I dare say. Oh, yes, sir. Very well, then. He is a veterinary surgeon, a farrier, and horsebreaker. Give me your definition of a horse. Sissy Jupe thrown into the greatest alarm by this demand. Girl number 20 unable to define a horse, said Mr. Gradgrind, for the general behoof of all the little pitchers. Girl number 20 possessed of no facts in reference to one of the commonest of animals. Some boy's definition of a horse, Bitzer, yours. Bitzer, of course, who is the product of Gradgrindery, defines horse in a very factual terms. The scene continues as Bitzer gives a very logical definition of a horse as quadruped, graminivorous, 40 teeth, etc. Here, Sissy Jupe's idea of a horse doesn't matter. People whose livelihood depends upon horses don't matter at all. All that matters is facts which the model people Bitzer vomits out. The irony is evident here. This kind of ironic method, according to Lewis, has very little effect usually. But in Dickens, we can see the flexibility of his art in the use of his ironic method. Sissy Jupe, the conventional character, is established in a symbolic role here. She is the part of the poetically creative operation of Dickens's genius in Hard Times. She also becomes the opposite of the calculating self interest which Thomas Gradgrind and Bounderby stand for. She stands for vitality and goodness. There is also a scene where Bitzer and Sissy Jupe are described, where the girl, Sissy Jupe, who is so dark eyed and dark haired, gets the bliss of the sun rays, while the Gradgrindery product Bitzer does not. So, Sissy is so full of vitality, is described as receiving the lustrous bliss of sun, than the quasi mechanical product of Gradgrindery, that is Bitzer, in that particular scene. Sissy's symbolic significance is also connected to Sleary's horse riding. Both of them are associated with human kindness. The significance of horse riding here is the poetic dramatic effect of Dickens's art. Gradgrind's utilitarian house, Stone Lodge, is described as some sort of an inescapable prison for the Gradgrind children. Going home nearby his house, Gradgrind catches his own children peeping through a hole to get a glimpse of the Tyrolean flower act of the circus people nearby. Both the children, Louisa and Thomas are described by adjectives like metallurgical and mathematical. Circus people in the novel represent human spontaneity and vitality. Even though they are scorned by people like Bounderby and Gradgrind, they bring art and joy to the industrial Coketown and thus becomes symbolically relevant. They are indeed Dickens's reaction to industrialism. This is described by Lewis by comparing it to a passage from Lady Chatterley's Lover by D.H. Lawrence. The confutation of utilitarianism by life is also conducted with great subtlety. Subtlety is also another feature of Dickens's art. Gradgrind's initial kindness and Bounderby's attitude to Sissy are examples for this. Now let's look at Dickens's art. As I said, he has a stamina, a flexibility combined with consistency, and a depth that he seems to have had little credit for. A kind of ironic method which associates itself to this flexibility. An example of this is seen, obviously, in the classroom scene. Gradgrind telling Louisa of Bounderby's proposal is the triumph of the ironic art. So, a possible objection could be there for the symbolism of Dickens. It could be that what if it is sentimentally false? Isn't Dickens' symbolism of the circus people too far fetched? Lewis justifies this. He says that the virtues and qualities that Dickens presents in horse riding is true and is necessary for his critique of utilitarianism. It is indeed impossible to charge the book with misleading representation of human nature, and it wouldn't be intelligent criticism to do so to suggest that anyone could be misled about the nature of circus in hard times. The question could be that was it right for him to try to do that with a traveling circus? Rather, the question also could be how he did it because he seems to be incredibly successful in his attempt. It might be because we have been conditioned for a conventional narrative from the first chapter itself. So let's look at the symbolism of Dickens here, which is represented by the characters of Sissy Jupe, Sleary, and also the circus people. So there is an extraordinary flexibility in the art of Dickens again. Some passages are like that of an ordinary novel. Some show the ironic pointedness like that of a Johnsonian comedy, like that of the comedy of Ben Jonson. Some are literary, like Gradgrind's conversation with Louisa when she escapes the attentions of James Harthouse. So there is incredible diversity to the narrative of hard times. This is evident in the richness of life that characterizes the book everywhere. This portrayal of life is incredibly real. Dickens doesn't write poetic prose, but he so sharply sees and feels what he writes. So he writes with a poetic force. That's why it affects the readers as a poetic work. So when we talk about symbolism, Lewis talks about symbolism of horse riding. There is no instance um, of recoil or disgust in the portrayal of Sleary, who is shabby, brandy soaked, and flabby surfaced. He is the humane, anti utilitarian positive in hard times. Sissy Jupe is part of the poetically creative operation of Dickens's genius. She represents Dickensian vitality, goodness, and generosity. As I said earlier, she is the antithesis of the calculating self interest of the characters which represent utilitarianism. Again, Sleary's horse riding is associated with human kindness. As I said, he is the positive character and the utilitarian positive in hard times. He illustrates the poetic dramatic nature of Dickens's art, especially horse riding illustrates the poetic dramatic nature of Dickens's art. And Lewis continues to say that if D.S. Lawrence were to write this kind of a narrative about a character like Sleary, who is again shabby, brandy soaked, and flabby surfaced, he would have said, "My God, they stink." The third category of characters which represent Dickensian symbolism is the circus people. They represent human spontaneity. They have highly developed skill and deftness of kinds that bring poise, pride, and confident ease. This is a profound reaction. The representation of the circus people is a profound reaction to industrialism. Now, let's look at the sentimentality of Charles Dickens. Dickens's sentimentality can be seen in the portrayal of the victimized workman Stephen Blackpool. Another matter is Sissy Jupe, whom Dickens assigns work in the utilitarian household of Gradgrind. The quiet victory of disinterested goodness is wholly convincing in her as she tells Harthouse to leave Louisa alone. She is also Dickens's tool in establishing the distinction between Gradgrind and Bounderby. While Gradgrind is capable of humane feeling, Bounderby is Johnsonian in the sense that he is incapable of change and he remains the egotistic braggart. But for Gradgrind, life proves him and his philosophy wrong. He shows a change in character by the end of the novel. Lewis says that Dickens's art differs from Ben Jonson's art in its flexibility and inclusiveness because it includes all sorts of things. Now let's look at the Johnsonian affinities in the novel. Johnsonian affinities means affinities of Dickens to Ben Jonson. It can be seen in the schoolroom scene and in the fact that Bounderby is incapable of change, and in the representation or in the portrayal of Tom, the son of Gradgrind, as the sardonic comedy imagined with great intensity. The scene in which Gradgrind has to recognize his son in a comic Negro servant has a rich complexity of Dickens's art, a sardonic tragic in which satire consorts with pathos. Tom's Escape is an example of Dickensian high fantastic comedy. So, the psychology of the development of Louisa and Tom is perfect. She has no other emotional outlet but the love for her brother, and she marries Bounderby for her brother. Tom decides to do his revenge for the way he was brought up when he gets a post in the bank of Bounderby. Hence, his descent into debt and bank robbery is natural, according to F.R. Lewis. Fleeing the advances of Harthouse, Louisa reaches her home and falls at the feet of her father, crying, and says that all she knew is his philosophy, which is of no help to her now in her crisis. Gradgrind's love for his child overtakes the philosophy, and here we can see how the philosophy is confuted or refuted. Tom again is the sardonic comedy imagined with great intensity. There is a scene where Gradgrind sees Tom disguised as a Negro servant, as I said, and it is Sleary who makes his escape possible. So, Gradgrind's conversation with Tom here becomes an example of sardonic tragic, where satire consort with pathos. Lewis here calls Dickens a poetic dramatist and associates his flexibility in the interpretation of life to Shakespearean drama. Ironically, the product of Gradgrind's philosophy, Bitzer, tries to prevent the escape of Tom. Tom's escape, as I said, is an example of Dickensian high fantastic comedy. So, the solemn moral of the story is put into the mouth of Sleary. There is a scene where he tells Gradgrind the possibility of the death of Sissy's father because his performing dog had returned to the horse riding. This is an example of Dickens's subtlety of art. His understanding of Victorian civilization is adequate for his purpose, according to F.R. Lewis. He had a command of word, phrase, rhythm, and image which no other literary master except Shakespeare had. His triumph of sentimentality and pathos can be seen in the portrayal of Mrs. Gradgrind, too. So, having said all of these things, Lewis also brings out some points of criticism to the novel, Hard Times. First one is that Stephen Blackpool is too good a character. Second one, his adaptation, Dickens's adaptation of the objection against Uncle Tom in the events concerning Stephen Blackpool. Uncle Tom was a white man's good nigger in another novel by Harriet Beecher Stowe. and the novel is titled Uncle Tom's Cabin. So there was an objection against the portrayal. So here Dickens is actually affirming that objection according to Dickens. So that is a point of criticism. And then third one is Dickens's lack of understanding of trade unionism. Fourth one is his lack of understanding of politics. So that's all about Hard Times, an Analytic Note by F.R. Lewis. I have also written a blog on this particular topic. If you want, you can check out my blog. The link will be in the description below. So, thank you.